Have you ever caught yourself explaining why you ordered a salad instead of pizza to a waiter who literally doesn't care? Or crafting an elaborate story about your personal obligations just to leave work 10 minutes early? Or defending your life choices to people whose opinions you don't even respect? Here's what's really happening. You're begging for permission to exist. Every single time you explain yourself to someone who didn't ask, you're teaching them that your decisions are up for debate. You're advertising your insecurity. You're handing over your power to people who never deserved it in the first place. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." But you're living like you need a committee approval for your breakfast choice. And here's the part that's going to make you uncomfortable. The people who make you feel like you owe them explanations. They never explain themselves to you. Think about it. When was the last time your boss explained their lunch order? When did that confident friend justify their weekend plans? When did anyone with real power in your life defend their personal choices to you? They don't. Because they understand something you've forgotten. Explaining yourself is not courtesy. It's weakness disguised as politeness. But here's the truth that's going to change everything. The moment you stop over-explaining, people will either respect you more or reveal they were never worthy of your respect in the first place. Jung called this psychological individuation, and it's the difference between living your life and performing it. The question isn't whether you should stop explaining yourself. The question is, how long will you keep betraying yourself for people who see your kindness as an invitation to control you? Let me reveal the hidden manipulation you don't see. Every time someone asks you, "Why did you choose that?" or "Why are you doing this?" they're not seeking understanding. They're testing your boundaries. They're seeing if you'll scramble to justify yourself, which tells them they have power over you. Think about it. When was the last time someone truly powerful in your life explained their personal choices to you? Your boss doesn't explain why they drive a certain car. Confident friends don't justify their weekend plans. Successful people don't defend their lifestyle choices. But you explain why you ordered salmon instead of chicken. You justify taking a personal day. You defend your decision to leave a job, end a relationship, or move to a new city. You've been conditioned to believe that explaining shows respect. But Jung reveals the uncomfortable truth. It shows weakness. This is what Jung called the persona, the mask we wear to gain social acceptance. Your over-explaining isn't really about being considerate. It's your persona desperately trying to avoid disapproval, rejection, or conflict. But here's what's happening in the shadows while you're explaining yourself. Others are learning exactly how to manipulate you. They discover that all they need to do is express curiosity or mild disapproval, and you'll immediately go into explanation mode, seeking their validation. You become predictable, controllable, and they start to lose respect for you even if they can't articulate why. Picture this. You walk into work wearing a new jacket. Instead of just wearing it, you immediately launch into an explanation about why you bought it, where you got it, how much it cost, why you chose this color. The person listening didn't ask for any of this information, but you're volunteering it anyway. What are you really doing? You're preemptively defending yourself against criticism that doesn't even exist yet. Now imagine that same scenario, but this time you just wear the jacket. Someone might notice it, might even compliment it, but you simply say thank you and move on. No explanation, no justification, no performance, just presence. Here's what happens. People unconsciously register your confidence. They sense that you're not seeking their approval, which makes them want it more. They start wondering what gives you such certainty, such self-assurance. You've shifted from being the one seeking validation to being the one others seek validation from. Meanwhile, you're exhausting yourself with constant justification. You spend more mental energy preparing defenses for your choices than actually enjoying the life you're living. You rehearse conversations in your head about decisions you've already made. You craft elaborate justifications for normal human preferences. You apologize for existing in your own space. But here's where it gets truly insidious. You start editing your life before you live it. You choose the restaurant that's easiest to explain, not the one you actually want to visit. You take the job that sounds good to others, not the one that calls to your soul. You date the person who fits everyone else's expectations, not the one who ignites something real in you. Jung called this living the unlived life, making choices based on imaginary conversations with imaginary critics. You're not just explaining your decisions, you're letting the fear of having to explain them control what you decide in the first place. But the most dangerous part? You start making decisions based on how easy they'll be to explain rather than what you actually want. Your life becomes smaller, safer, more acceptable to others, and less authentic to yourself. You begin to suffocate under the weight of other people's potential opinions. Jung understood that this pattern creates what he called psychological dependence, where you literally cannot feel secure in a decision until others approve of it. You've given away your internal compass and replaced it with external validation. You've trained yourself to seek permission for your own existence. And here's the cruelest irony. The people who demand explanations from you never feel obligated to explain themselves. They've unconsciously learned that they can get a power rush from watching you perform for their approval. They ask not because they care about your reasoning, but because they enjoy seeing you scramble to justify yourself. But that's what we'll talk about in the next part. How this manipulation works on an energetic level, and why Jung believed it was one of the most destructive patterns keeping people from individuation. Before we continue, if this is hitting you in a deep place, if you're starting to see the pattern I'm describing in your own life, subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of people who are ready to reclaim their psychological sovereignty. And trust me, you're going to need support for what comes next. Now let's dive into Jung's psychological framework for understanding why over-explanation is so destructive to your personal power. Jung discovered that every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you're literally feeding others with your psychological energy. Think of it like this. Your attention, your mental resources, your emotional labor, all of it gets directed toward managing other people's comfort with your choices. This creates what Jung called projection dynamics. When you over-explain, you're essentially saying to others, "Your opinion of my choices matters more than my own relationship with my decisions." And people unconsciously register this. They start projecting their own insecurities, judgments, and control needs onto you because you've signaled that you're available for it. Here's how the energy drain works. Normal people make a decision and move forward. Their energy flows in the direction of their choice. But over-explainers make a decision, then immediately split their energy. Part goes toward the choice, but a larger part goes toward managing other people's reactions to the choice. Jung called this psychological hemorrhaging. You're constantly bleeding energy into other people's emotional systems instead of keeping it contained within your own authentic self. But here's where it gets really dangerous. When you chronically over-explain, you start attracting what Jung termed psychological vampires. People who unconsciously feed off your need for approval. They learn that all they have to do is look slightly confused or disapproving, and you'll immediately start performing for them. Watch this dynamic in action. You decide to take up painting as a hobby. A healthy person might say, "That sounds interesting," and move on. But the psychological vampire will tilt their head, raise an eyebrow, and say, "Really? Painting? That's unexpected." They're not asking for information. They're fishing for your insecurity. They want to watch you scramble to justify why painting is a worthwhile pursuit, why you think you have artistic talent, why you're spending money on art supplies. These people don't actually care about understanding your choices. They care about the power rush they get from watching you scramble to justify yourself. And the more you explain, the more they question. The more you justify, the more they probe. It becomes a feeding cycle where your energy flows directly into their ego. But here's the psychological twist Jung identified. The vampire doesn't consciously know they're doing this. They've simply learned, through years of social conditioning, that certain people will dance for their approval. You've trained them to expect explanations by providing them consistently. You've taught them that your decisions are negotiable, that your choices require their endorsement. Meanwhile, people who respect boundaries, the kind of people you actually want in your life, start avoiding you. Why? Because your over-explaining makes them uncomfortable. It feels manipulative to them, even if that's not your intention. They can sense that you're trying to control their opinion of you through explanation, and healthy people resist that kind of manipulation. Jung called this energetic repulsion. Secure people are instinctively repelled by insecurity disguised as consideration. They don't want to be responsible for validating every choice you make. They want to interact with your authentic self, not your approval-seeking persona. Jung understood that this pattern stems from what he called the unlived life, the gap between who you really are and who you think you need to be to gain approval. The bigger that gap, the more explaining you have to do to bridge it. You're essentially running a constant PR campaign for your own existence. But here's Jung's most disturbing insight. Over-explanation is actually a form of unconscious manipulation. You're trying to control other people's thoughts and feelings about you through the quality of your justifications. You're saying, if I can just explain it well enough, craft the perfect narrative, they'll have no choice but to approve of me. This is what Jung called covert narcissism. Not the obvious kind where someone demands attention, but the subtle kind where someone demands approval through seemingly selfless explanation. You're making your choices about them, not about you. You're performing your life rather than living it. The energy mathematics are brutal. Every minute you spend explaining yourself to someone who didn't ask is a minute stolen from actually experiencing your life. Every mental rehearsal of justifications is energy that could have gone toward creative expression, meaningful work, or genuine connection. But here's the truth that will set you free. People who require explanations for your personal choices don't respect you, and people who respect you don't require explanations for your personal choices. And here comes Jung's greatest revelation about why silence is the ultimate power move. Jung discovered that the most psychologically powerful thing you can do is make statements without justification. Not, I'm leaving early because I have a doctor's appointment and traffic might be bad and I want to make sure I'm not late. Just, I'm leaving early today. This isn't about being rude or inconsiderate. It's about what Jung called authentic self-expression, speaking from your center rather than from your need for approval. When you stop over-explaining, something magical happens. You force other people to confront their own psychological patterns. The person who's used to receiving your explanations suddenly has to sit with their discomfort instead of getting their validation fix from your justifications. This breaks the manipulation cycle completely. Remember those psychological vampires I mentioned? They can't feed off someone who doesn't offer explanations. They'll try to provoke you. That's interesting, they might say with a raised eyebrow, or, okay then, with a judgmental tone. But when you don't take the bait, when you don't rush to fill the silence with justifications, they have nothing to feed on. Watch what happens in that moment of silence. The vampire expects you to crack, to rush in with explanations, to perform for their approval. But instead, you simply exist in your decision. You don't explain, defend, or justify. You just are. And something shifts in their brain. They realize often for the first time, that they have no actual power over you. Jung called this shadow confrontation. When you stop over-explaining, you're essentially holding up a mirror to other people's controlling behaviors. They're forced to see their own manipulation tactics. And most people don't like what they see. They'll either respect your boundary or reveal themselves as someone who was never worthy of your energy in the first place. Here's what will happen when you implement Jung's approach. First, you'll feel uncomfortable. The silence after stating your decision will feel heavy, almost suffocating. Your nervous system, trained for years to seek approval through explanation, will scream at you to fill that silence. Jung said this discomfort is actually a good sign. It means you're breaking free from psychological dependence patterns. Your body will betray you at first. Your heart will race. Your palms might sweat. You'll feel the overwhelming urge to add just one small explanation to make everyone comfortable again. This is what Jung called individuation anxiety, the fear that comes with choosing your authentic self over social acceptance. Some people will push back hard. They'll say you're being cold or rude or changed. They might even gaslight you. You used to be so nice. What happened to you? Jung understood this as projection. They're projecting their discomfort with losing control over you onto your character. But notice something crucial. They're not actually asking for information. They're asking for submission. The people who criticize your new boundaries are revealing something about themselves. They were never interested in you as a person. They were interested in you as a source of validation, entertainment, or control. When you remove yourself as their emotional supply, they have no choice but to show you who they really are. But here's the most powerful part. The people who truly matter in your life will respect this change. They'll start treating you differently. They'll stop questioning your decisions and start seeking your approval. Why? Because you've demonstrated something Jung called psychological sovereignty, the ability to live from your own center rather than from the opinions of others. Jung's approach isn't about becoming antisocial or refusing all communication. It's about distinguishing between people who deserve explanations and people who simply want to control you through questioning. Your intimate partner discussing major life decisions, that's collaboration and mutual respect. Your coworker questioning why you chose that particular sandwich for lunch, that's boundary testing disguised as conversation. The transformation Jung promises is this. When you stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned that level of access to your inner world, you reclaim your psychological energy. Instead of bleeding your power into other people's approval systems, you contain it within yourself. You become what Jung called individuated, whole, self-directed, authentic. But here's the part Jung warns you about. This transformation isn't comfortable for anyone around you. When you stop being predictable, when you stop dancing for approval, when you stop explaining yourself into submission, people will have strong reactions. But get ready to look into the eyes of those who realize they can no longer manipulate you through questions and judgment. Here's what Jung understood about this transformation. First comes the silence, then comes the strength. When you first stop over-explaining, there will be an uncomfortable silence. People will wait for your justifications. They'll probe with questions. They'll express confusion or disapproval. And you'll feel the urge to rush in with explanations to make everyone comfortable again. Jung called this the individuation crisis, the moment when you choose your own psychological development over other people's comfort. It's not easy. Your nervous system has been trained to seek approval through explanation. Breaking this pattern feels like psychological rebellion against everything you've been taught about being good and considerate. But here's what happens if you stay strong through this initial discomfort. You start to discover who you really are underneath all those justifications. Jung called this meeting the authentic self, the person you are when you're not performing for others' approval. The first thing you'll notice is how much mental energy you suddenly have. All that cognitive power you were spending on crafting explanations, rehearsing justifications, and managing other people's emotions about your choices. It's now available for actually living your life. You'll feel like you've been carrying invisible weights that have suddenly been lifted. Your decision-making becomes cleaner, faster, more confident. Why? Because you're no longer making choices based on how easy they'll be to explain. You're choosing from your actual preferences, values, and intuition. You stop asking, "What will others think?" and start asking, "What do I actually want?" But Jung warns, this is where the real discomfort begins. When you start making choices from your authentic center instead of from social conditioning, some of those choices will be controversial. You might leave the career everyone thinks you should love. You might end relationships that look perfect on paper but feel empty in reality. You might pursue interests that others find strange or frivolous. The people around you will start responding differently. Those who were used to controlling you through questions will either adapt to your new boundaries or remove themselves from your life. Jung said this is the purification process. Your life naturally filters out people who are only connected to your insecurities, not your authentic self. And this purification can be brutal. You'll discover that some people who claim to care about you were actually addicted to your need for their approval. When you remove that source of power over you, they'll reveal their true nature. They'll become angry, manipulative, or simply disappear. Jung called these people shadow projectors. They need your weakness to feel strong. But here's the most beautiful part. You'll start attracting different people. Confident, self-directed individuals who respect boundaries will be drawn to your energy. You'll find yourself in conversations with people who make statements rather than seeking constant validation. You'll discover what Jung called authentic relationship, connection based on genuine compatibility rather than mutual manipulation. Your professional life will change too. People will start coming to you for decisions rather than questioning your choices. You'll develop what Jung termed natural authority, not because you're trying to control others, but because you're no longer controllable yourself. When you stop seeking everyone's approval, people start seeking yours. Yes, some people will call you selfish. Jung would say, good. In a world full of people who have no sense of self, having boundaries will seem selfish to those who benefit from your boundarylessness. They'll use words like selfish, cold, and changed as weapons to try to guilt you back into explanation mode. Some will say you've changed, that you're not as nice as you used to be. Jung's response, you're not here to be nice. You're here to be real. And real people don't explain their authenticity to others. Nice is a performance. Authentic is a way of being. You might lose some relationships, but Jung promises you'll gain something more valuable. Self-respect. The deep, unshakable knowledge that your choices are valid because they're yours. Not because others approve of them, but because they come from your authentic center. This is Jung's ultimate promise. When you stop explaining yourself to people who haven't earned explanations, you stop betraying yourself to people who don't deserve loyalty. The question is, are you ready to be misunderstood by people who never really knew you anyway? Are you ready to choose psychological sovereignty over social approval? Tell me in the comments. Are you ready to stop explaining yourself and start living yourself? Write "I choose silence" if you're committed to reclaiming your power through Jung's wisdom. And remember, every time you don't over-explain a personal choice this week, you're practicing what Jung called individuation, becoming who you really are instead of who you think others want you to be. The people who truly belong in your life will love you more for it. And the people who don't? Well, Jung would say that's information worth having. Your authentic self is waiting. Stop explaining it and start living it.